I was halfway through a cup of coffee at a 24-hour diner when she approached my booth and asked, "Can you sit with me until my shift ends?" I looked up, expecting a joke, but she was serious. She wore a navy blue uniform, her dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail, and there was a tiredness in her eyes that coffee couldn't fix. I closed my laptop and nodded. "You don't have to ask," I said. She gave me a small smile, almost surprised by the answer. Most people would ask why. Most people aren't me. She laughed quietly and pulled out the chair across from me. Her name was Claire. She worked the overnight shift at the diner, mostly serving truckers, nurses, and the occasional exhausted traveler like me. I had stopped there every Thursday for nearly a year after leaving my construction job downtown. Until that night, Claire and I had barely exchanged more than polite greetings. For the next 20 minutes, she kept working while I sat in the booth. She refilled coffee, cleared plates, and occasionally glanced toward me as if checking whether I was still there. Then, around 1:40 a.m., the diner emptied. Claire locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and stood behind the counter staring through the glass. "He said he'd come back," she finally whispered. I didn't ask who. Something in her voice told me she wasn't ready. "Do you want me to leave?" I asked. She shook her head. "No." She sat across from me again and wrapped both hands around a mug she wasn't drinking from. "My brother was supposed to pick me up." "He stood you up?" I asked gently. "Not exactly." She looked down. "He promised my mother he would make sure I got home safely. But he stopped answering after midnight." I noticed her phone lying face down on the counter. The screen lit up once. She immediately turned it over without checking the message. That tiny movement bothered me more than it should have. "Claire," I said, "if something's wrong, you can tell me." She looked at me for several seconds. "I know." Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She didn't hand it to me. She simply placed it on the table between us. "I found this in my locker tonight." I looked at the envelope. My name wasn't on it. Neither was hers. But there was one sentence written across the front in black ink: "Don't let her go home alone." Claire watched my face carefully. "That's why I asked you to stay." I stared at the message again, aware of how quiet the diner had become. "Who wrote this?" I asked. Claire swallowed. "I don't know." She pushed the paper toward me. "But I think whoever wrote it knows something about my brother." I looked toward the locked door, then back at Claire. Happening next, I knew I wasn't leaving her alone. I read the sentence again, then turned the paper over, hoping there might be something written on the back. There was nothing. Claire watched me carefully. "You really don't know who left it?" I asked. "No." She shook her head. "But there's something I haven't told you." She reached for her phone and opened a message thread. "My brother, Daniel, hasn't been himself for the last month." "How so?" "He keeps asking me strange questions. Where I work. What time I leave. Whether I'm alone." She hesitated. "Last Friday, he told me to quit this job." I frowned. "Did he say why?" "He said someone was watching me." Claire gave an embarrassed laugh. I thought he was being paranoid. She showed me several unanswered messages from Daniel. The last one had been sent at 12:07 a.m. "Stay inside until I get there. Don't trust anyone outside." "And then nothing?" I asked. "Nothing." I looked through the diner window. The parking lot was almost completely empty except for my truck and a dark sedan parked beneath a broken street lamp. I pointed toward it. "Is that car usually here?" Claire looked. The color drained from her face. "No." She stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "That's the same car. You've seen it before. 3 times this week." She stepped away from the window. I thought I was imagining things. I moved closer to the glass but stayed inside. The sedan remained still, its windows too dark to see through. "Call the police," I said. Claire shook her head. "What would I tell them?" "Someone parked outside." Before I could answer, headlights suddenly appeared at the far end of the lot. The dark sedan started moving. Claire grabbed my arm. "Don't let it see me." I guided her behind the counter, and we waited as the sedan slowly passed the diner without stopping. Then it disappeared around the corner. Claire let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You should never have gotten involved." I chose to stay. She looked at me, and for the first time, the guarded expression on her face disappeared. "Why?" she asked. I thought about the note, the car, and the fear in her eyes. "Because somebody clearly wants you scared," I said. "And I don't like people using fear to control someone." Claire looked down at her phone again. Suddenly, it vibrated. A new message appeared from an unknown number. She opened it, and we both stared at the screen. "He's not the one you should be afraid of. Ask him about the red box." Claire slowly turned toward me. "What red box?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't know." Then her eyes widened. "Wait." She reached beneath the counter, pulled out a small key, and whispered, "There's something in the employee locker room I've never opened." Claire led me through the narrow hallway behind the kitchen, past the stacked boxes of coffee and cleaning supplies, until we reached the employee lockers. The fluorescent light above us flickered twice before staying on. She stopped in front of locker 17. "This is mine," she whispered. "I've had it for 3 years." She inserted the small key, but her hand trembled so badly she missed the lock. I took one step closer. "Want me to do it?" She nodded. When the locker opened, there was nothing unusual inside. At first her spare sweater, an umbrella, an old pair of sneakers. Then Claire moved the sweater aside and froze. Tucked against the back wall was a small red metal box. "That wasn't there before," she whispered. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." She pulled it out and placed it on the bench. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a stack of photographs, several printed emails, and a folded bank statement. Claire picked up the first photograph. It showed Daniel standing beside a man neither of us recognized. The second showed the same man entering the diner through the back door. Then she found a photograph of herself walking to her car after work. Her face went pale. "Someone has been following me." I picked up the bank statement. There were several large withdrawals from an account belonging to Daniel. Every withdrawal had been made on nights when Claire worked. "Do you know this account?" I asked. She shook her head. "No." Then I noticed something written on the back of one photograph, "Ask Claire about Mom's house." Claire stared at it for several seconds. "My mother's house? What about it?" She sat down heavily. "My mother died last year. She left the house to me and Daniel equally." I looked at the bank statement again. "Did you sell it?" "No." "Did Daniel?" "He said he was trying to refinance it." She suddenly stopped talking. "Oh my God." "What?" "He told me the bank needed my signature." She reached for her phone and opened an email from Daniel. It contained a document she had signed electronically 2 weeks earlier. I thought it was a refinancing form. I read the heading. It wasn't a refinancing agreement. It was a transfer authorization. Claire had unknowingly signed away her half of the property. "He stole your share," I said quietly. Tears filled her eyes. "Why would my brother do that?" Before I could answer, footsteps sounded from the hallway. Claire quickly closed the box. We stood completely still. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Then someone knocked twice. Claire grabbed my sleeve. "Nobody should be here." I moved toward the doorway and looked through the narrow glass panel. A familiar face stood on the other side. Claire covered her mouth. "That's Daniel." He raised his hand and pointed directly at the red box. Claire stared at Daniel through the glass, tears running silently down her cheeks. He knocked again. "Claire, open the door." I looked at her. "Do you want him inside?" She shook her head. "No." I stepped toward the door and locked the deadbolt. Daniel's expression changed immediately. "You don't understand what's happening," he called. "Then explain it from there," I answered. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Daniel sighed. "The red box has everything." Claire looked at me. "Everything about what?" Daniel lowered his voice. "About the man who has been following you." He told us the truth. The stranger in the photographs had been working with a contractor who had tried to buy Mom's house for far less than it was worth. Daniel had discovered the scheme and started investigating. The withdrawals from his account weren't payments to them, they were deposits into an attorney's trust account while he tried to stop the sale. But he had made one terrible mistake. He was afraid Claire would panic, so he kept her in the dark. Worse, he had asked her to electronically sign documents without explaining them. Those documents were supposed to stop the sale, but the paperwork had been altered before reaching her. Daniel had been trying to fix everything before she discovered it. "Why didn't you tell me?" Claire asked. Daniel looked down. "Because Mom made me promise I'd protect you." Claire shook her head. "You were supposed to trust me." He nodded. "I know." Then he told her the most important part. The attorney had already filed a corrected property document using the original records from the red box. Claire's half of the house was safe. The printed emails and photographs were also enough to prove the attempted fraud. Daniel opened the door only after Claire agreed. He walked inside and immediately looked at me. "Thank you for staying with her." I nodded. "She asked me to." He smiled sadly. "She doesn't ask for help easily." Claire looked at me. "Neither does he." For the first time that night, she laughed. The police eventually arrived after Daniel gave them the information they needed, and the investigation moved forward. By sunrise, the danger that had followed Claire for weeks finally had a name and evidence behind it. She sat across from me at the same booth where the night had started. The diner windows were glowing with the first morning light. "You know," she said quietly, "when I asked you to sit with me, I thought I was asking you for one night." I smiled. "I figured that." She looked at the empty chair beside me. "Would you come back tomorrow?" I looked at her and said, "You don't have to ask." She smiled, and this time there was no fear behind it. Just relief. Sometimes, you don't save someone by fixing their life. Sometimes, you simply stay long enough for them to believe they don't have to face it alone.